Physical education is important for all students, including children with visual impairment. Although planning will be necessary, it is important to include students in the physical education program as it is a required component of the standard curriculum. As with other students, students with visual impairment need to be actively involved in physical education programs that teach lifelong skills to maintain their health. In order to make the program accessible to students, there are adaptations and specialized equipment that may need to be employed to ensure that the student can fully access the physical education program. Prior to determining appropriate adaptations, it is important to first understand the student's functional vision. The teacher of students with visual impairments will provide information for the team members and physical education teacher on each student's unique visual needs. The instruction of physical education programs should be planned and deliberately taught and should focus on the development of lifelong skills. Often, students who are visually impaired do not experience the same opportunities for physical education programs that students with no vision loss have in the early years. Physical education programs provide an avenue for the development of motor skills, social skills, language skills, and fitness. It is important to expose the students to as many age-appropriate physical education programs as possible. This will best prepare the student for future inclusion and independence. Support the inclusion of students with visual impairments in group activities. Be sure that students play and talk with classmates rather than sit on the sidelines. Remember that students with visual impairment need support from staff during periods of free play on the playground. The visually impaired student should be able to participate in most physical education programs except for those that require good visual acuity. Build a student's self-confidence by letting them try. Take the student through an activity or a game a couple of times before requiring independent movement. For a sighted student, motor imitation is a visual skill. A student who is visually impaired needs to experience the activity physically. Rules may be modified to accommodate visual limitation, but care should be taken not to alter the basic structure of the game if at all possible. For example, in volleyball, the ball may be permitted to bounce once, or the visually impaired student may take one serve before each team begins serving. The visually impaired child will want the activity to remain as close to its original form as possible. In some cases, special equipment is desirable to facilitate the full participation of the child in a given activity. This equipment can be purchased from a supplier or can be developed by the physical education specialist. In archery, for instance, an auditory signal can be placed behind the target. When developing modified equipment, it would be advisable to seek the assistance of the visually impaired child. The child may or may not want to use balloon or beach ball. Table tennis is an example of the game with a limited area that a child with a narrow visual field may be able to enjoy. Playing games in a small gym or a handball court may facilitate greater involvement for the visually impaired child without greatly distorting the experience for the normally sighted participants. For example, instead of a regular ball, a balloon may be used in a game of catch. A child with a field loss may be able to keep the balloon in the central portion of vision because it is moving with less speed. For example, a beach ball can be used to play volleyball. If the child has an acuity loss, he may be able to see the object when he is far away from it if it is larger than regular size, although targets can be made larger or moved closer to the player. If the eye condition has resulted in limited visual field, it may be helpful to use a smaller ball or move the target further away so it can be seen in the field of vision. A ball can be taped with bright yellow or orange fluorescent or black tape so that it contrasts with the floor and wall. A shuttlecock can be painted a bright color to contrast with the playing court. Colored tape can be used to mark the playing areas. Contrasting colors can also be used for table games. Find out if the child sees better under certain lighting conditions. It is also helpful to discuss with the child what factors may be visually distracting. For example, some children are bothered by stripes, dots, certain colors, and lights reflecting off glass. Provide a change in floor texture. For example, place a rubber carpet runner or tumbling mats next to the wall so that the child knows when he steps onto the changed surface that he is stepping out of bounds. The change in surface is also a warning signal to him that a wall or object is coming up, so he needs to put on the brakes. The child will move much more freely if he knows that hazardous objects are not in the playing area. Simple games can be adapted easily, but it may be more challenging to adapt team sports. Although games can be adapted, students will need to acquire the motor skills necessary to fully participate in the games. Skills needed to play in games may need to be taught in isolation. It is important to be aware of the students are more at risk for retinal detachment. Also, some eye conditions can be aggravated by vigorous physical activity. The student should either refrain from the activity or it should be modified. The chessboard of 64 squares has the following modifications. All the black squares are raised about 3 to 4 mm above the white squares. By feeling the squares, the player is able to determine whether the square is a black or a white one. Each of the squares on the board has a hole in the center so that the pieces can be fixed in these holes. Each of the pieces has a downward projection at the end base, which fits into the hole in the squares on the board, thereby fixing the piece securely on the board. All the black pieces have a pin fixed on their heads, helping the player distinguish between a white and a black piece. The players, therefore, by feeling the raised or the lowered squares, can figure out whether the piece is on a black or a white square. By feeling the shape of the piece, they can determine whether the piece is a pawn, rook, bishop, knight, queen, or king. The touch of the pin on the pieces helps the player from distinguishing a white piece from a black one. The player is therefore able to have a clear picture in his mind of the position on the board. He is now ready to take on any opponent, sighted or otherwise. After making every move, the visually impaired person is required to announce the move aloud so that his opponent comes to know of the move. Instead of writing the moves on a score sheet, the visually impaired player writes the moves in braille or records the moves on a tape recorder. Encourage movement exploration. Focus on how the body moves by bending, stretching, turning, swinging and curling the body by itself as well as in relationships to the objects and other people. Help students to become aware of their body and the ways in which it can move. A good movement vocabulary will help the child to learn new skills more efficiently. Teach the child to jump, land and roll while standing in place, while moving and while jumping off equipment. This is a good safety skill which will help the child become more confident, and because he will then know that he can handle himself on a spill. Go from the less difficult to the more difficult skills and down skills into their component parts. For example, to teach the child to catch a ball, begin by bouncing the ball to the child from a short distance away. Gradually increase the distance, then decrease the distance again but eliminate the bounce. Finally, increase the distance again. A large, lightweight, softer ball would help. Also be aware of the child's previous experiences in games and other areas. Some visually impaired children have not developed activity skills because they were never given opportunities to participate in play. Thus, the physical education recreation specialist may need to begin working with basic skills before involving the child in some regular play activities. Before throwing the ball, give the receiver a sound clue. A bounce pass will be easier to receive than a direct pass. Utilize large heavy balloons to slow down the speed of the ball. The use of yarn balls, fluff balls and nerf balls lessen the impact of a direct hit to the body. When throwing at a target, provide a sound reinforcement, for example bells behind the target. Beepers can be used or just have someone strike the target first. To practice striking skills, place a ball suspended from the ceiling. If you want the ball to move through space upon hitting it, utilize Velcro. Place Velcro on the end of a rope which is suspended from the ceiling and matching Velcro taped onto a light ball with a bell in it or attached to the ball. In this way, the child will learn about the projection of the ball as well as how to control his hit in determining the power and direction in which the ball will go. The visually impaired student may also use a slow motion ball or large wiffle ball and oversized plastic bat. A ball can be rolled on a table or the floor. A large ball, several small bells placed inside, it makes an excellent rolling target. Partners can provide safe assistance in running. They may hold hands or use breast contact. Another technique is the visually impaired student and guide runner each hold the end or loop of a flexible piece of material. A visually impaired runner may be able to run to a collar for a short run. A student can also run by himself by holding onto a rope or wire stretched out between 2 points. Provide a warning signal about 8 feet from each end. If tape is wrapped around the rope, the student can quickly turn at that point and continue a shuttle run. The foundation for bicycling can begin when a child is young. Providing opportunities for students to play on riding toy is a good introduction. Older students can build endurance and experience physical activity by using a stationary bike. Students with low vision may be able to learn to ride a bike, but depending on their level of available vision, may need to ride alongside a sighted adult or peer who can warn the student of any dangers. Some students with low vision will be able to safely bicycle independently. However, it is always safer to ride in pairs. Run tandem with a sighted guide. In high jumping, use a one-step approach. Some visually impaired students may be able to take more than one step and be successful at clearing the bar. The hop, step and jump and the long jump can be attempted from a standing start. Provide a sound source from the direction you want the student to move. The discus and shot put require the use of a sound clue from the direction you want the object released. Some visually impaired students may not need any modification. Some may need a visual cue to see the jump board or the bar. Use a handrail with a free hand to guide bowler in a straight path towards pins. Give immediate feedback as to how many pins are knocked down. Students can learn basic bowling skills by playing with homemade or purchased bowling sets that can be used at home and school. A sound source can be placed behind the pins in order to provide an auditory target for the students. Many bowling lanes will provide bumpers or portable bowling rails upon request. Stack bails of hair around target as backbone. Use high contrast between backdrop and target. Stress safety and proper technique. Place brightly colored shapes or balloons on target. Make targets larger. Place bright marker or blocks on the ground to make sure students facing the proper direction. Place sound source at target. Have sighted buddy give feedback on where arrows are contacting. Use brightly colored bows and arrows. Mark bows and arrows with different textures. Tell students when to begin shooting and when to stop so that arrows can be retrieved. Tie string line to target and have students follow it to retrieve arrows. Provide a tactual floor cue which is perpendicular to the target. Have student stand sideward to tactual floor cue. Provide a sound cue below or in front of target. Help student zero in on target by telling him to move bow to the left, right, up or down. Use larger traffic cones about 1/3 distance to help a visually impaired student locate the target. Use plastic clubs of hockey sticks. Use bright colored plastic or regular balls. Place sound source at cup. Place border around putting area as input. Have buddy give cues on distance, cup location and terrain. Square students up with ball and target. Help the student get the side of his body facing the target. A sound or visual cue can be used. Students should wait for an all clear signal before swinging. Many people with vision impairments can become fast, competent swimmers able to work alongside sighted people and compete against them. You too may need to take the following points into account. Familiarize a person with vision impairment with the layout of the changing rooms, the route to the swimming pool and the pool layout, particularly location of steps and handrail. At the start, let the swimmer orient themselves around the pool, how long it is and how wide it is. The person might like to walk the width of the pool before they start swimming. Ensure that the person is familiar with the emergency signal and emergency procedure for clearing the pool. Provide high visibility exit signs. Verbal commands should be extremely clear and you need to be aware of voice distortion by echoes. Consider your teaching position. To avoid glare, do not stand in front of a window. Before demonstrating a stroke using touch, always let the person know that you are going to use touch beforehand. Brightly colored landmarks will guide the person, enabling them to swim in a straight line. Prevent a person from banging into the side of the pool by tapping them gently on the head with a float, a stick with a ball on the end or other light implement. When swimming the front, crawl along the side of the pool. Watch that the student doesn't bump his head against the wall. Teach him to use a delayed arm stroke as he anticipates the upcoming wall. Make the racing lane about 3 feet wide in order to give immediate input to the student about the direction of his stroke in relation to a straight line. When diving, have the student request an all clear signal before taking his dive. Safety is the most important aspect of any sports activity. Begin teaching lead-up skills at a young age. Use modified equipment. Teacher, coach or parent chooses teams. Allow visually impaired child to choose teams. Switch teams or partners frequently. Never allow regular kids to pick teams. Adjust size of field or court. Use sighted guides or buddies. Keep area clear and uncluttered. Allow plenty of practice time. Braille copy of rules. Modify rules to needs of students. Reduce number of players on field or court. Bright colored boundary lines. Place orange cones at bases and baselines. Have brightly colored t-shirts or pennants for different teams. Make tactual maps of playing area. Allow students to tactually explore equipment. People with vision impairment may wish to participate in a group game. These games often include a lot of speed and physical contact, but the following modifications may make it easier for people with vision impairments to participate. When arranging groupings, consider the size of group and each player's familiarity with the game. Reduce size of playing area and mark the boundaries clearly. Adapt equipment. Increase the size of the ball and choose a bright contrasting color ball. Simplify the rules. The rules of blind cricket are based on the standard laws of cricket with some essential modifications. In terms of playing equipment, the major adaptation is the ball, which is significantly larger than a standard cricket ball and filled with ball bearings. The size allows partially sighted players to see the ball and the contents allow blind players to hear it. The stumps are also larger to allow partially sighted players to see and blind players to touch it in order to correctly orient themselves when batting or bowling. Verbal signs are widely used both by umpires and players. In particular, the bowler must shout play as he releases the ball. The delivery is required to pitch at least twice when bowled to a completely blind batsman, once when bowled to a partially sighted batsman, but must not be rolling. Totally blind batsmen cannot be out-stumped and must be found to be LBW twice before going out. Totally blind fielders are allowed to take a catch on the bounce. Racket games are games such as table tennis, badminton, squash and tennis. Some of the simple adaptations to these games include use a brightly colored table tennis ball or larger brightly colored shuttlecocks. Good color contrast will make the ball easier to see and locate. Lower the height of the net or use another barrier such as a bench. Increase size of ball, making it easier to see. Reduce density of ball. For example, use balloon ball to reduce speed. Place barriers around a tennis table so that the ball will not go too far astray. With the addition of simple adaptations, a person with low vision can easily play net or wall games as part of a team. People who are totally blind may have considerable difficulty playing racket games that involve locating and hitting a fast-moving object. If a blind person and a sighted person are playing racket games, they should use steady, gentle shots and have fun with keeping the rally going. These activities are most valuable for the visually impaired student and require very little change. Give explicit body-oriented instructions such as to your left or pull elbow into sides or reach forward and then up. Step aerobics and basic movements are great. Where needed, provide extra verbal instruction and up-close or hands-on demonstration. Vaulting. Start with hands on vault or use a one-step approach. Beam. Encourage bare feet or light slippers. Use a long strip of carpet the same size as the beam on the floor. Tumbling. Provide an area free of objects. Have a buffer area around the exercise mat to give a warning of upcoming obstacles. The mat should be of the best color contrast. A verbal cue can help keep student going straight and a signal a totally blind tumbler when he approaches the end of the mat. Use a hand touch start. Whenever body contact is lost, start again in the stance position with the hand touch. Encourage children with visual impairment to play. Supervise their activities but do not overprotect them. Allow them to behave as sighted kids would during play. It is normal for children to engage in rough and tumble play at a young age. Visually impaired children should explore and climb on playground equipment. Find clear open spaces where they can run and skip and hop safely and independently. All children should learn to swim, skate, ride a bike, and participate in many individual lifetime sports activities. Give children with visual impairment as many physical experiences